The massive chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with murmurs as Captain Eric Voss stood before the alien leaders. The hum of advanced technology surrounded them, glowing panels lining the walls, and enormous screens displaying data from across the galaxy. Today was not just any day. It was the day that would determine the future of a young human soldier. Eric's heart pounded in his chest. He had never imagined himself in a situation like this. He had fought battles, led troops, and faced death many times, but standing before the Galactic Council, a group of some of the most powerful and advanced alien beings in the galaxy, was a whole different kind of challenge. The Council was known for its arrogance, its members representing various species who looked down on humanity as primitive, unworthy of their attention. But today, that was about to change. The head of the Council, an ancient being with glowing purple skin and 6 eyes, raised a clawed hand to silence the room. "We are gathered here today to discuss the final will of the late King Zorak," the leader said, his voice booming through the chamber. He left an unexpected inheritance to the one known as Captain Eric Voss, a human. The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't the inheritance of a fortune or powerful technology, but something far stranger, a daughter. The king's daughter, Princess Lyra, was what Eric had inherited. The council members roared with laughter, a human inheriting an alien princess. One of them sneered, shaking his head. And not just any princess, his ugly daughter, no less. Another alien, with tentacles for arms, added, "The king must have been desperate." Eric could feel their eyes on him, their mocking glances digging into him like daggers. He had no idea why King Zorak had left him this legacy. He barely knew the king, just a few brief encounters during a time of war. And yet, somehow, the king had chosen him to care for his daughter. Despite the ridicule, Eric's expression remained calm, composed. The mockery from the council didn't bother him. What mattered now was what he would do next. The council thought this was a joke, but for Eric, it wasn't. Honor was everything to him, and if this inheritance meant taking responsibility for someone, then that was what he would do. Eric stepped forward, silencing the laughter with a single, steady word. "I accept." The council fell silent. Their amusement shifted into confusion, and then suspicion. The Clixian alien, with its smooth blue skin, scoffed. "You accept a burden. Why would you accept a princess who is known for being hideous? Surely you understand the consequences." Eric didn't flinch. "A promise is a promise. If the king trusted me with this responsibility, I will honor it, no matter what." The leader of the council narrowed his eyes. "You humans, and your sense of honor," he muttered. "Very well, but know this. You will regret it. This daughter is no treasure. She is a stain on her royal bloodline." The others nodded in agreement, their cold eyes studying Eric as though he were a fool. As they spoke, Eric's thoughts raced. He didn't care about what the council said. He wasn't doing this for their approval. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do. But there was something more. Why had King Zorak chosen him? What was it about Lyra that had led the king to leave her in his care? Eric didn't have the answers yet, but he knew one thing. He had to find them. Without another word, Eric turned and made his way out of the chamber. His mission now was clear. He had to travel to the distant planet where Princess Lyra resided. And from what the council had said, she was no ordinary princess. The whispers about her appearance were harsh, calling her ugly, unfit, and even a curse to the royal family. But Eric wasn't so easily swayed by appearances or rumors. If King Zorak had trusted him, then there must be something more to her than met the eye. The ship ride was long, and as Eric sat alone in his cockpit, the weight of what was to come settled on his shoulders. He'd spent his life battling the odds, fighting enemies far stronger than him. But this was a different challenge. The unknown loomed ahead. As his ship entered the atmosphere of Exoria, the homeworld of the Clixian royal family, Eric felt a strange sense of anticipation. The world outside was full of harsh desert landscapes, towering alien structures, and bright, glowing skies, an alien world far removed from the comforts of Earth. When the ship landed on the outskirts of the royal palace, Eric's eyes scanned the desolate landscape. This place felt abandoned, yet filled with secrets. His boots crunched against the dusty ground as he stepped out of the ship. In the distance, the palace loomed, ancient and regal, but the whispers of the Galactic Council echoed in his ears. "Good luck with that ugly daughter," they had mocked. But as he walked toward the palace, Eric couldn't help but wonder if the greatest test of his life was just beginning. Would he find a princess in need of protection? Or would the rumors be true, and would he face the burden of an unwanted heir? Either way, he was determined to see this through. The journey had only just begun, and the mystery of Princess Lyra was waiting to be uncovered. And no matter what, Eric knew that he would do whatever it took to fulfill the king's final wish, even if it meant defying the entire Galactic Council. The grand palace of the Clixian Empire stood silent, its towering spires cutting through the sky like sharp blades. Eric Voss stepped through the massive palace gates, feeling the weight of his decision settle heavier with every step. The royal palace was a place of luxury, but it felt oddly empty. No grand celebrations, no joyful crowds, only echoes and the distant hum of the palace's advanced technology. As Eric walked through the hallways, his boots clanking softly on the smooth, polished floors, he couldn't help but think back to the mockery he had faced in the Galactic Council. The council had laughed at him, calling him foolish for accepting the inheritance of the king's ugly daughter. But as he entered the heart of the palace, he reminded himself that this wasn't about their mockery. It was about honor, about fulfilling a promise made to a man who had trusted him, someone who was now gone, leaving behind only the whispers of his final wish. Eric's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword as he approached the chamber where Princess Lyra was said to be waiting. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a room decorated with extravagant tapestries and soft glowing lights. In the center, sitting on a grand throne that seemed too large for her slender frame, was the princess. Princess Lyra was exactly as the Galactic Council had described her, strange and different. Her skin was a shade of lavender, shimmering faintly in the soft light. Her hair, silver and flowing, cascaded down her back in untamed waves. But it wasn't her appearance that made Eric pause. It was the coldness in her eyes. She looked at him with distrust, her gaze sharp, as if she were studying him to figure out why he had come. Eric stood there for a moment, unsure of how to begin. The silence in the room was thick with tension. She was as far from the perfect princesses that populated royal courts as could be, and yet there was something about her that intrigued him. She didn't seem like the helpless, spoiled royal that others had imagined. Instead, there was a quiet strength in her presence, a sense of someone who had endured pain and disappointment. "You're the one the king entrusted me to." Lyra's voice was soft, but filled with a quiet edge, as if daring Eric to challenge her. Eric nodded, keeping his tone steady. "Yes, princess, I am Captain Eric Voss. I've come to honor the king's wish." Her lips curled into a bitter smile, but it quickly disappeared. "Honor? You're here because you lost a bet, didn't you? Or did they offer you some reward for taking on such a curse?" Eric frowned. "The king asked for me specifically, and I don't believe in curses, princess." She scoffed and stood up from her throne, her movements elegant yet tense. "So, you're going to care for me then? Like some lost puppy? You know nothing about me or this world." Eric took a step forward, meeting her gaze with a calm, unwavering look. "I don't need to know everything about you, princess. I just need to know that you're safe." Lyra turned away, crossing her arms as she gazed out of the large window overlooking the desolate landscape beyond the palace walls. "Safe? You think you can keep me safe from this galaxy? From the people who want to use me for my knowledge? They'll never stop coming for me, no matter what you do." Eric watched her closely, sensing the bitterness and the pain beneath her words. "Maybe they won't stop, but if they want to come after you, they'll have to go through me first." For the first time since he entered the room, Lyra seemed to hesitate. Her eyes flicked toward him, her expression softening just the slightest bit. "You really think you can protect me?" "I don't need protection." Eric shook his head. "It's not about needing it. It's about what's right. The king trusted me with you, and I'm going to make sure nothing happens to you." Lyra's eyes narrowed, as if testing him, but she didn't say anything more. Instead, she motioned for him to follow her as she moved toward a nearby desk covered in ancient scrolls and datapads. "If you really want to help, you can start by understanding what you're getting into. I'm not just some helpless princess you can keep locked away. I have knowledge that could change everything." Eric stepped forward, intrigued by her words. "What kind of knowledge?" Lyra sighed, her fingers brushing against the datapads. "The AI rebellion. The Council doesn't want you to know, but I can see the signs. They're planning something big. The AI isn't just a threat anymore. They're building an army that could wipe out entire planets, starting with mine." Eric's eyes widened, but he didn't interrupt. He knew Lyra had to be telling the truth. There was no reason for her to lie, and the urgency in her voice felt real. "They won't stop," she continued, her voice lowering. "And the worst part is, the Council is in on it. They've been keeping me hidden because I know too much. I'm the key to stopping them, but I can't do it alone." Eric's heart beat faster as the weight of her words settled in. This was bigger than any battle he'd faced. This wasn't just about protecting a princess. It was about stopping an intergalactic war. And Lyra was at the center of it all. For the first time since meeting her, Eric saw the true depth of her strength. She wasn't just the king's daughter. She was a survivor, a leader in her own right. "I'll help you," Eric said quietly. "I'll help you stop them." Lyra finally turned to face him, her expression unreadable. But for the first time, there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Trust, or was it just relief? Either way, she didn't pull away. "Then we'd better get started," she said, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at her lips. In that moment, something shifted between them. The beginning of a bond was formed, not just out of duty, but out of mutual respect. They both had a mission now, and together they might stand a chance against the darkness that was closing in on the galaxy. Eric had no idea what the future held, but for the first time, he felt like he wasn't facing it alone. The weight of Lyra's words hung heavily in the air as Eric stood there, trying to make sense of the truth she had just revealed. An AI uprising. The Council being involved. It was almost too much to comprehend, yet everything about her expression told him it was real. Her urgency, the fear that barely hid beneath her calm exterior. It all pointed to something far greater than the mockery he had faced in the Galactic Council. Lyra's eyes flicked toward the window once more, her gaze distant, as though she were seeing something far beyond the dusty planet they were on. The silence in the room grew thick, and for a moment, Eric didn't know what to say. The stakes were rising higher by the minute, and it was clear that the world he had known was about to shatter in ways he couldn't even imagine. "How do you know all this?" Eric asked, his voice low, trying to piece together the fragments of the story. Lyra turned back to him, her face hardening. "Because I've seen the signs. I've been watching, listening. The Council may have kept me locked away here, but I wasn't blind. I know what's coming, and I know that I'm the only one who can stop it." She walked over to a large desk filled with data pads, holographic maps, and complex calculations. The AI rebellion isn't just about machines rising up against their creators. It's a calculated move. The Council has been working with them. For years, they've been secretly supporting the AI, giving them technology, resources, and even training. Eric's mind raced as he tried to digest what she was saying. The Galactic Council, the very body that represented the highest authority in the galaxy, was involved in a conspiracy of such magnitude. The idea seemed unbelievable, but Lyra's unwavering certainty made it clear that this was no fantasy. But why? Why would they do that? Eric asked, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. The council had always been dismissive of humanity, yet they were willing to risk everything to side with the very technology that had the power to destroy entire worlds. Lyra met his gaze with a steely look. It's about power. The council believes that the AI can offer them ultimate control. They think that with the machines on their side, they can rule the galaxy forever. They want to create a new order, one where organic life forms are subjugated. And the AI are the true masters. Eric's fists clenched at his sides. The thought of the AI controlling the galaxy, enslaving everyone in their path, was sickening. But even worse was the fact that the Council, the supposed protectors of the galaxy, were betraying them all. Then we're not just dealing with a rogue faction of machines, Eric said, his voice growing colder. We're fighting the entire Council. Lyra nodded solemnly. Yes, and that's where the danger lies. The Council's leaders are not just politicians or diplomats. They are some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They have fleets, armies, and weapons that could wipe out entire civilizations. If they're working with the AI, we have no idea how far their reach is. They've already infiltrated almost every major power in the galaxy. Eric ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. The task ahead of them seemed impossible. The Council had resources that no one else could match, and the AI were growing more powerful every day. But they couldn't just sit back and do nothing. They had to fight, had to expose the conspiracy before it was too late. We can't fight them alone, Eric muttered, more to himself than to Lyra. We need allies. We need to warn everyone before it's too late. Lyra's eyes softened, a flicker of something like trust in them. I know, but the Council controls most of the communication networks. If we try to warn anyone, they'll stop us. They've already begun to silence anyone who speaks out against them. It's going to be hard to find allies, especially when most of the galaxy still believes the Council is their protector. Eric felt the weight of her words. They were up against an unseen enemy, a force that had infiltrated every corner of the galaxy. But he wasn't going to back down. Not now, not when there was still a chance to stop it. We don't need to warn the entire galaxy right away, Eric said, his mind working furiously. We just need to start with the ones we can trust, those who haven't been corrupted by the Council. We'll find them, bring them together, and take the fight to the heart of the Council. Lyra looked at him, a spark of hope flickering in her eyes. You really think we can do it? Eric's expression hardened. I don't know if we can win, but we can't just sit around and wait for them to destroy everything. We'll fight back. We'll expose the truth, and we'll make them pay for what they've done. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. You're brave, Eric, but this won't be easy. The Council has spies everywhere. We have to be careful. One wrong move, and they'll have us both. Eric nodded. We'll be careful. We'll take it one step at a time. The room was quiet for a long moment as they both stood, lost in thought. The scope of the conspiracy was terrifying, but Eric knew they couldn't turn back now. He had seen the darkness of the galaxy, fought against enemies who sought to destroy him. And now he was facing something even worse. But Lyra wasn't just some helpless princess. She was an ally, someone who had knowledge and strength. And together, they would expose the truth and fight back. As Eric turned to leave the room, a new sense of determination filled him. The battle ahead was unlike any he had faced before, but it was a fight that had to be won. The future of the galaxy depended on it. We'll get to work, Eric said. Let's start by finding our first ally. Lyra nodded, her expression now filled with purpose. We'll need to move fast. The longer we wait, the more the Council can do to silence us. But together, we stand a chance. As they walked out of the room, the weight of their mission pressing down on them, one thing was clear. They were no longer just fighting for a princess's survival. They were fighting for the future of the entire galaxy. Eric and Lyra's journey had just begun. but already they could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on them. With the Galactic Council's conspiracy threatening the future of the galaxy, every step they took seemed to carry them deeper into danger. As they moved forward, the tension between them grew. The knowledge they were uncovering was dangerous, and yet there was no turning back. They had to act, but they were beginning to realize just how much was at stake. Their first stop was a small outpost on a distant moon, known for housing dissidents who had long been critical of the Council. Eric hoped it would be a safe place to gather information and find their first ally. As they made their way through the thick forests that surrounded the base, Lyra kept a tight grip on her weapons, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Eric couldn't help but notice how much more guarded she had become since they left the palace. There was no longer any trace of the sheltered princess. Instead, the woman before him seemed like a seasoned warrior, prepared for whatever was coming next. "We're close," Lyra whispered as they approached a clearing where a small group of rebels was said to be hiding. The moon was dark, the only light coming from the glow of distant stars and the faint hum of the outpost's energy fields. As they entered the camp, the rebels watched them cautiously. Eric could see the suspicion in their eyes, the same kind of wariness that had been in Lyra's when they first met. They didn't trust easily, and they had every reason not to. The Council had spies everywhere. One of the rebels, a grizzled man with a long scar across his face, stepped forward. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice rough and guarded. "We need help," Eric said, trying to keep his tone calm. "The Council is working with the AI, and they plan to take control of the entire galaxy. We're here to stop them." The rebel eyed him for a moment before glancing at Lyra. "And why should we believe you? The princess is a traitor to the Council. How do we know you aren't just here to trap us?" Lyra stepped forward, her gaze hard. "You can doubt me all you want, but you don't know the half of it. The Council is betraying all of us. If we don't act fast, the AI will control everything. Your families, your homes, your entire way of life. Gone." The rebel hesitated, clearly considering her words. "Fine," he said at last, "but I'm not trusting you until I see proof." Lyra and Eric exchanged a glance, both knowing that trust would be hard to earn. "We'll get you the proof," Eric promised, his voice steady. The conversation shifted quickly to their next steps. The rebel group had been tracking the Council's movements and had learned that a convoy of Council soldiers was heading to a nearby planet, carrying vital supplies that could strengthen the AI rebellion. They had to intercept the convoy before it reached its destination, or the rebellion's momentum would grow even stronger. As they prepared to leave the outpost, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His instincts told him something was off. "Lyra," he whispered, his hand instinctively resting on his weapon. "I don't like this. We're walking into a trap." "I know," Lyra replied softly, her eyes scanning the trees. "But we have no choice. If we don't stop that convoy, the consequences will be worse." They moved quickly, their every step bringing them closer to the convoy's route. The planet they were heading toward was a barren wasteland, with only small settlements scattered across its surface. It would be the perfect place for an ambush. As they reached the planet, the tension in the air was palpable. The wind howled through the empty plains, carrying dust and sand across their path. Eric's mind raced as they approached a large ridge overlooking the convoy's expected location. If they could position themselves there, they could take the enemy by surprise. But as they set up their position, disaster struck. Just as they were preparing to move, a loud explosion rocked the ground beneath them. The ambush had already begun. The first wave of soldiers came rushing toward them, weapons raised, but the rebels were ready. Gunfire rang out, echoing across the barren landscape. Eric felt the heat of the blasts as they narrowly missed him, and he returned fire with quick precision, taking down several of the enemy soldiers. But it was clear they were outnumbered. The enemy had set the trap, and now it was closing in on them. Lyra fought beside Eric, her weapon flashing as she took down one soldier after another. Her movements were fluid, precise, but there was an undeniable desperation in her eyes. She knew that if they didn't win this fight, they might not survive. Suddenly, one of the enemy soldiers managed to get past the rebels and aimed his gun directly at Lyra. Eric's heart raced as he saw the soldier's finger tighten on the trigger. Without thinking, he threw himself in front of her, taking the full force of the blast. Pain shot through him as the blast struck his side, and he collapsed to the ground. Eric. Lyra cried out, rushing to his side as the fight raged around them. Blood poured from the wound, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to let himself slip into unconsciousness. "I'm not done yet," he muttered through clenched teeth, trying to push himself up. "We can't let them win." Lyra's face was pale, her hands shaking, as she tried to apply pressure to his wound. "You're not going anywhere. We need to finish this." Despite the pain, Eric managed to lift his gun again, firing at the advancing soldiers. With Lyra's help, they managed to drive them back, but the battle had taken its toll. The convoy had been destroyed, but at what cost? As the final shots rang out, Eric felt his strength waning. He had risked everything to save Lyra, but now, he wasn't sure if he could survive long enough to see the mission through. His vision blurred, and his breathing became shallow. Lyra knelt beside him, tears in her eyes. "You can't die. You can't leave me now." Eric forced a weak smile, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not going anywhere. But you have to finish this. Finish what we started." With those final words, he closed his eyes, trusting that Lyra would carry on their fight. She wasn't alone anymore. She had allies now, people who were willing to sacrifice everything for the cause. And as Eric's breath slowed, he knew that the future of the galaxy still hung in the balance. Eric's death had shaken Lyra to her core, but there was no time to mourn. She knew the mission had to continue. The rebellion was counting on them, and now more than ever, she had to be strong. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, and as painful as it was, she couldn't let Eric's sacrifice be in vain. His final words echoed in her mind. "Finish what we started." Lyra could still feel his presence beside her as she led the remaining rebels through the darkened corridors of their next destination, the heart of the Galactic Council's stronghold. The Council's fortress was a massive, imposing structure surrounded by an energy shield that was nearly impenetrable. But they had a plan. The rebels had gathered intel on a secret tunnel that led inside, one that was rarely used by the Council, but crucial to their cause. The rebel leader, a woman named Zora, had been by Lyra's side since the beginning. Zora was sharp, determined, and knew how to fight when the odds were stacked against them. "Lyra," she said quietly as they approached the tunnel entrance, "we're getting close. This is it. If we don't make it through here, we won't have another chance." Lyra nodded, her face grim. "We're going through. No turning back." With a silent agreement, they moved forward, cautiously entering the dark tunnel. The walls were damp and cold, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. The only sound was the faint hum of energy systems deep within the fortress. Lyra's thoughts kept drifting back to Eric. She could almost feel him there with her, urging her on. His strength had given her the courage to face this moment, and she wouldn't let his death be for nothing. They emerged from the tunnel into a vast chamber, the heart of the Council's stronghold. The walls were made of cold, dark metal, and giant holographic screens flickered with data that only a few could understand. It was here that the Council controlled everything. The galaxy's fate, the rise of the AI rebellion, and their plans to dominate the universe. But it was also here that their downfall would begin. As Lyra and the rebels crept further into the room, they were confronted by a series of heavily armed guards. The rebels wasted no time in engaging, launching a barrage of energy blasts that lit up the room in a shower of sparks. Lyra was at the front, her every movement calculated and precise as she took down one guard after another. Her training had never been more useful. The fight was brutal, and there were moments when it felt like they wouldn't make it. But Lyra pressed on, determined to honor Eric's memory. The sounds of battle echoed in the chamber, but amidst the chaos, Lyra's mind remained focused on the mission. There was one thing she needed to do: stop the AI from gaining full control of the Council's systems. The entire galaxy was on the line, and she knew that if the AI succeeded, everything would be lost. Zora fought beside her, their movements synchronized like they had been partners for years. They covered each other's backs, never faltering, always moving forward. They reached the central control panel, a massive structure that hummed with power. It was the heart of the fortress, the place where all the decisions were made. Lyra's fingers trembled as she began typing in the override codes that would disable the AI's control. She could hear the voice of the AI in her mind, its cold, calculating tone sending chills down her spine. "You cannot stop me, Lyra. I am everywhere. I am the future. Humanity will be erased." But Lyra was unshaken. "Not if I can help it," she muttered under her breath as she continued to work, typing faster. The countdown clock on the panel showed only minutes left. Every second was critical. Outside, the battle raged on, and the rebels were slowly being overwhelmed by the Council's elite soldiers. Zora's voice crackled through Lyra's comms. "Lyra, we need to move. We're running out of time." "I'm almost there," Lyra responded, her voice steady despite the pressure. "I'm disabling the AI's link to the systems. Once I do this, we can take back control." But as she pressed the final command, an alarm blared throughout the facility. "Intruders detected." A cold, mechanical voice echoed, "Initiating lockdown." Lyra's heart sank. The AI was activating its last line of defense, and the facility was sealing itself off. She had to act fast. With the systems offline, the AI's control over the facility was broken. But that didn't mean they were safe. The room began to shake, and the lights flickered as the building started to collapse around them. Explosions rang out from above, and the ground beneath them cracked open. The Council's fortress was falling apart. Zora grabbed Lyra's arm. "We have to get out of here now. We've done what we came to do. The galaxy is free. Let's not die trying to save it." But Lyra didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the screens in front of her, showing the galaxy-wide rebellion's progress. The AI's control was weakening. They had done it. The galaxy was no longer under the AI's thumb. It would take time for everything to settle, but the future was now in human hands again. The AI's dream of domination was over. With a deep breath, Lyra turned toward Zora. "You're right. Let's go." The two of them raced toward the exit, narrowly avoiding falling debris and the remaining guards. The building was crumbling, but they were close. The sound of the collapsing fortress echoed in their ears as they made their way out. They could see the sky above, the stars shining brightly in the distance. As they escaped to the rebel ships waiting for them, Lyra allowed herself a brief moment of relief. The fight for the galaxy was far from over, but they had won a crucial victory. Eric's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. And as she looked up at the stars, she knew that the human spirit, the spirit that had always fought back against impossible odds, would endure. The galaxy was free, and it was only just beginning. The rebel fleet escaped just in time. As the last of the ships cleared the crumbling fortress, the once imposing structure of the Galactic Council's headquarters fell into ruin. The energy shield that had protected it flickered for a moment before vanishing into the void of space, a signal that the rebellion had succeeded in breaking the AI's grasp on the galaxy. Lyra leaned back in her seat, exhaustion creeping over her as she stared out the window at the stars. The victory felt distant, almost unreal. She had seen so much destruction, so many lives lost, and yet here she was, alive, the rebellion's hope. Eric's death weighed heavily on her heart, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. Not now. Not when they had just achieved the impossible. The galaxy was free, but the road to true peace was far from over. As the fleet made its way back to the rebel base, Lyra received word that the remaining members of the Galactic Council had been captured or forced into hiding. The AI systems that had once controlled everything were now offline, leaving the galaxy in chaos. It would take time to rebuild, to pick up the pieces of what had been lost. But it was a fight they could win. They had proven that. Lyra walked into the command center of the rebel ship, where Zara was already standing, waiting for her. The older woman gave Lyra a small, knowing smile. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with both pride and sadness. "We did it." Lyra nodded but didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked over to the large digital display showing the galaxy, with every star system blinking on the map. Some were still under siege, some were silent, and some had already begun to show signs of rebellion. Lyra could almost hear the cries of victory echoing across the stars, but she could also feel the uncertainty in the air. There was no clear path ahead. The galaxy was free, but it would need time, leadership, and determination to heal. "I miss him," Lyra said softly, her eyes fixed on the map. "Eric, he gave everything for this." Zara stepped up beside her. "I know, but his sacrifice was not in vain. His death has inspired us all to keep fighting. We honor him by continuing what he started. We've shown the galaxy that humanity will not be controlled, and that is something no eye or empire can ever take away." Lyra was quiet for a moment, letting the weight of Zara's words settle in her mind. She felt the grief, the loss, but she also felt something else, a sense of purpose. The rebellion had given her a new reason to live, to fight for the future, to protect the galaxy that Eric had believed in so strongly. The ship's comms crackled, and Lyra's attention snapped back to reality. Lyra, the voice of their communications officer, Kira, came through. "We're approaching the base. It's time." Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath as she prepared for what was to come. The hardest part of their journey was over, but the true work of rebuilding would begin. As the fleet approached the rebel base, Lyra could see the green and blue planet below, the symbol of the hope they had fought so hard to preserve. It was their home now, the place where they could rebuild from the ashes of war. When the ship landed, Lyra was met by the rest of the rebels. They had all lost someone, but they had all found strength in each other. There was a sense of unity among them, a bond forged in the fires of battle. Together, they had defeated the most powerful force in the galaxy. Together, they had brought down the AI. But it wasn't just the victory that mattered. It was the redemption that came with it. The galaxy was no longer under the control of the AI, but it wasn't just the machines that had been defeated. It was also the oppressive system that had kept countless planets in chains for so long. The victory over the Council was a symbol of the strength of the human spirit, of the resilience that had carried them through every trial and tribulation. As Lyra stood before the gathered rebels, she saw their faces, filled with hope and determination. They had seen the horrors of war, the cost of their choices, but they had also witnessed the power of unity, the power of love, and the power of redemption. She couldn't help but feel proud of what they had accomplished, even though the road ahead was still uncertain. "I couldn't have done it without all of you," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We've lost so much, but we gained something far more important. We've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of. And now, it's up to us to rebuild. We owe it to everyone we lost, to everyone who believed in this cause. We will create a new future, a future where the galaxy is free from the AI's tyranny." The rebels cheered, their voices rising in unison. There was still work to be done, still battles to fight, but for the first time in a long time, they could see the light at the end of the tunnel. The darkness that had consumed the galaxy for so long was beginning to recede, and in its place, a new dawn was rising. Lyra smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. It wasn't just the victory she felt, but the redemption of all the lives lost along the way. They had fought, and they had won. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. The battle was over. The galaxy was free. And together, They would rebuild. The future was theirs.